All right, folks, so we have a very special guest here. He is an OG in the progressive media game. He's been in the game for, I believe, like 14 years or longer, and he has amassed almost 450,000 subscribers on his channel, The Ring of Fire. I have Farron Cousins. How you doing, Farron?
Doing well. Thanks for having me today.
Yeah, sure thing. Thank you for coming on, man. I appreciate it. So I want to start out by asking you this. I mentioned that you're an OG. And it turns out that in the Sam Cedar and David Pakman set war, that turns out that you're actually the first one with the idea to use the panel behind the host. So tell me about that, and just tell me what your thoughts are on the whole situation.
Well, it's actually funny because we started that. That was with Go Left TV back in '07, and we've been great friends, obviously, with Sam Cedar. He's a part of Ring of Fire for many years, and our producer Scott had that set built, and then when Sam came to him a couple years later and said, "Hey, I'm going to build a set. I liked what you guys had there. How did you do it?" Scott told him, so he made his thing, and then I think kind of the same thing happened with Pakman, because we're actually a pretty close-knit group there, and Pakman was like, "Oh, hey, how did you do that?" And so everybody can do the same thing. It's funny, but actually, what's really funny, too, is I noticed on a commercial for Chopped Jr. a couple months ago, they had the exact same set, too, with almost the same color scheme that Sam and David are using. So it's a hugely popular idea. Everybody likes that set concept. So you know what? Have at it. More the merrier.
Are you gonna sue Sam Cedar for stealing your intellectual property?
Absolutely not. No. He is welcome to it. He's done a lot more with his set than we ever did with that Go Left set. So as far as I'm concerned, that's totally his now.
Okay, that makes sense. So what I wanted to ask you next is about, because this is a big controversy at the time, and it was a big thing. It was at the time of the 2018 elections that were going on. There was a lot of emotions going on. There were a lot of results to sort of digest for everyone, and so it was kind of tough. And you actually did, in your video, and I went back and I watched it, you did a breakdown basically of what happened in Florida, and it was tough because both Gillum and Nelson had lost, which meant DeSantis and the former governor had won his seat. So, and then you basically had done a breakdown saying that it's not because Gillum was doing like this sort of less left-wing push or change, but rather is because of, Floridians seem to kind of be racist, or they might have their heads up there, type of thing. And you called out Jimmy Dore and Kyle Kulinski specifically. I was just wondering if you have any other thoughts on that, and just your general breakdown of that situation.
Well, yeah, as far as me and Kyle are concerned after that, we messaged back and forth for quite a while, because he reached out to me and said, "Hey, man, what the hell?" And I was pissed. And so we went back and forth, and he explained to me a lot of things, and I explained to him some things. We worked it out. So as far as I know, and I think everything's, great between me and Kyle now. I have huge respect for him. And as far as what I said in that video, I did issue the apology on it. And I do think I took it way, it was not appropriate, basically. I think I said some things just super pissed off, living with these ramifications of having DeSantis as our governor now. And I took it out on him, and I absolutely shouldn't have. And so it was honestly after the fact, after everything calmed down and he and I kind of talked about it, it just kind of got a little embarrassing. I'm like, wow, that was rough. And then I guess a day or two later, got a bunch of DMs from Jimmy Dore.
Oh, really?
because I did, Kyle, like I said, we worked it out and everything's great. I apologized, and he addressed it on his show too. And then Jimmy Dore sends a couple. I woke up to those a morning or two later, and I just kind of looked at him and was like, I don't care.
Wow.
Because Kyle, look, I don't want to start fights, especially as we, come into the primary season here. We all need to be on the same board. Kyle's somebody I respect, and I like what he does, and I think he's really good, and he and I agree on probably 99%, if not more, of things out there. I was reacting out of anger and took it out on somebody I shouldn't have. As for Jimmy Dore, no, sorry. I'm not going to apologize to you. I don't care if I hurt your feelings with that. I don't care if you like me. I don't like what you do and how you do it. You may have been fairly decent at some point, but whatever the heck you've morphed into now is weird. And it's not for me. And I don't need to act like, oh, I'm truly sorry, Jimmy. No, I'm not. I wasn't going to do that. So, yeah, I don't even think I read all of the DMs he sent. It was only 2 or 3, and just kind of blew it off.
So you didn't respond at all? You just let him just
sit
there?
Just left it on red. Maybe, I don't know. It's been a little over a year. Maybe I should go back and respond to him now. Like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I just now saw this. Been so busy. But
he's probably going to see this before that. But
if he does, he does. Whatever. But I said what I said about him, and I'm not taking that back.
So there was actually this big there was a big debate that happened again. It was a very emotional time because obviously there was those results were horrifying, obviously. And so there was and I believe the percentages were pretty close in those races, right? They were pretty close. Yeah, so it's going to make it even more sort of difficult. But there was a debate as to whether or not, Gillum lost because he had started campaigning with Hillary and stuff like that. Or is it the voters were just being, racist? And I want to know what your thoughts are on that. Where do you land on that conversation?
Well, and that's part of the thing, too, and I did a poor job of explaining it in my video, because I did talk about the racism, because where I'm at, 10 minutes from Alabama, huge, super red, one of the reddest areas of the state. According to Southern Poverty Law Center, we've got a pretty decent concentration of hate groups in this area, which also happens to be Matt Gaetz' district. Oh. But, so this area, yeah, you've got a lot of that racism. Now, when you go to other parts of Florida, it's like going to a different country. So racism doesn't play as much of a role in those areas. You have some areas that are, little left of center. I wouldn't call them liberal by any stretch of the imagination. So those people were probably okay with the Hillary factor. Some people, like myself, we weren't thrilled with it, but we understood, obviously, the danger that a guy like DeSantis and the entire Republican legislature down here poses to this state. I mean, we also, in this same election, approved a measure by more than 60% to give 1.4 million former felons their right to vote back. And since his election day, inauguration day, DeSantis and the Republicans in the legislature have done nothing but try to stop those 1.4 million people from getting their right to vote back. I mean, they're in the process right now of trying to purge a couple 100,000 of them before they even register to vote with their little poll tax scheme that they put in place. So we know the damage. And I also understand, a lot of the other progressive media did call him out for campaigning with Hillary. And typically I would too. And honestly, if it were happening right now, I would be on the same bandwagon too. At the time, I kind of let emotion get over and say, you know what? If it works for him here, it works for him here. But I've evolved, a little bit since then. And I don't think anybody should hang their hat on Hillary's coat rack. I think she's just kind of toxic at this point and getting more toxic by the week. The Howard Stern interview the other a week or so ago, that was nuts. That was pure nuts from Hillary Clinton. And so, no, nobody should go out and campaign with Hillary Clinton. Nobody should go out there and say, hey, I'm friends with Hillary, vote for me. No, that's a non-starter for me.
Jimmy Dore actually had a theory of his that Hillary Clinton endorsed him on purpose so that he would lose. How do you feel about that?
I don't think that at all. I think that's a very weird thing to say. I think Hillary Clinton came down here to endorse the Democrat because obviously Florida's a big swing state. They want a Democrat to run it, make people realize, hey, Democrats are okay. We can vote for them in a presidential election again. But no, I don't buy into that conspiracy theory that she secretly wanted him to lose. that's, we're treading into Alex Jones territory with that.
Yeah, some of Jimmy's stuff gets into that territory. So what I wanted to ask you about is I wanted to get your thoughts on impeachment. Impeachment is rising up right now. It's definitely heating up. How do you feel in general about impeachment? And then what do you think about the odds of it passing through the Senate and ultimately Trump actually being removed?
My problem with the impeachment, which I do obviously support the impeachment, would love to see him convicted and removed. And I do think impeachment is right, if for nothing more than to hold him accountable. I also feel at the same time like the Democrats rushed this. I mean, we've been, 2.5 months on impeachment, and that's it? And that now we're going to be voting on it, and then it goes to the Senate? No, we're still getting news stories every other day about other potential crimes that really should have been added to this. I mean, Giuliani's interview yesterday. Yeah, I got Marie Yovanovitch fired, and I did it because I thought she would interfere with my Biden investigation. Guy admits that in this New Yorker article. And, we've already drafted the articles of impeachment. We can't add that. They didn't add any of the financial crimes that Michael Cohen implicated the president in. All they did was focus on he went after Biden. So now we got to hold him accountable. Didn't want to do it for the financial crimes Michael Cohen admitted he did for Trump. Didn't want to do it for the Emoluments Clause violations. Didn't want to do it for all the other obstruction of justice. But as soon as he went after Biden, now suddenly there's got to be accountability. And sure, I'm positive, based on the evidence we've seen, that was illegal. And I'm not saying, that, we shouldn't hold him accountable for that, because we should. But there's also 100 other things. The human rights violations on the southern border. Where are those articles of impeachment? I mean, we've been condemned by Amnesty International, by the United Nations, by other countries for doing this, and we're just forgetting that that's happening. It's happening right now. 3 children have died this year in those detention camps from the flu. But the crime is going after Biden. And I think once it goes to the Senate, I don't know that they're going to spend more than a week or two on this before they vote to go ahead and acquit him and move on. And once they do that, they're going to use their little fake sham trial to say, look, we listened to it, we voted on it, dude's totally innocent. That's why we didn't vote to remove him, so let's move on with our lives. And unfortunately, the Democrats had one shot at this. Really just the one shot. They rushed it. They didn't include everything they should have. And they could end up paying a price for it.
And do you think there's any chance of it passing the Senate whatsoever?
What we would have to see, and the best way to describe it is you'd have to meet so many different criteria that it'd be easier to qualify for Kamala Harris's student loan debt forgiveness program. You would have to have a Republican who's up for re-election in 2020 that sees their poll numbers drop to a point where they would definitely lose to their opponent, and that drop in the poll would have to be 100% related to their supporting Trump staying in office. If you do not meet each and every one of those criteria, you will not get those Republicans to flip. And I think the media has done a horrible job of this, because you see some of these articles come out like, these are the 3 Republicans that could flip. Chuck Schumer says lots of Republicans are thinking about. They're not. They're really not. Mitt Romney is not going to vote to remove Donald Trump from office. His niece is running the Republican Party right now. Susan Collins, I'm sure she'll have one of those. I'm so troubled by this, but you can stay, just like she did with Kavanaugh. Murkowski, same thing. They'll go back and forth like, I'm really torn on this. I don't know which way to go, but I guess we'll keep him. And that's what's going to happen. It's going to be done unless, of course, you meet all those little criteria, which right now I don't see that happening with any of the Republicans in the Senate. Yeah, Lindsey Graham, very close race. Also in that same race, 7% undecided. So those polls of, Lindsey Graham could lose his seat, digging into the numbers a bit more, and it doesn't exactly say that.
Okay, and they need 2/3 of the Senate, right? So that's going to be an insane amount of Republicans to flip.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they say they may get three.
Yeah.
Okay, well, three's not 18 or 20. So, good luck with. I mean, look, we're going to be lucky if we get Joe Manchin and Doug Jones to vote for impeachment in the Senate. I don't even think those guys will vote for it. So it's going to be very tough.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. So I want to ask you next about the 2020 election that's currently going on. I want to ask you what you think are Bernie Sanders' chances, and do you think Warren should drop out of the race and endorse Bernie?
Um, See, that's a little tough. As for Bernie's chances, I think they're great. And I'm really very optimistic about that, and far more optimistic than I was in 2016. Because by this point in 2016, it was obvious, right? Hillary had been coronated. We knew she was going to be the nominee even before Iowa. But now things are different. Every time Joe Biden goes out there and speaks, even though he's the front runner, he just makes people realize, wow, this guy ain't it. Bernie, on the other hand, is out there. He's talking about the issues. He's putting forward plans, and he's not budging on them. And that's the best part. Now, as for Elizabeth Warren, should she drop out and endorse Bernie? I'm not there yet. I am kind of growing increasingly more unhappy with her. I mean, the headlines today of her on her 3-day tour in Iowa emphasizing choice in healthcare. Now, that's a pretty strong word there, choice. And she's kind of hopping onto that whole, well, maybe Medicare for all. Maybe we phase it in over 3-4 years, maybe longer, who knows? And that's not okay. It's simply not okay. And those 3 years it takes to phase it in, what are we going to have 150,000 people in this country die because they can't afford health care? That's not okay. 5 people dying because they don't have health care is not okay. Yeah, it has to be rapid, it has to be sudden, but it has to be Medicare for all. There's going to be a couple hiccups along the way. It may not be the most pleasant transition, but we're going to get over that pretty dang quick and be able to have a system where if you're here, you can go to a doctor, you can get your medicine, and you're not going to receive a bill for $10,000 a week later. And that's the only path forward. If Elizabeth Warren continues to kind of back off the progressive ideals, then I would say she should drop out. But for now, I think it's a good idea to have her and Bernie in there because they are helping push the conversation a little bit further to the left. But if you want to know who I think should drop out, obviously I think Tulsi should. I think she's siphoning off, 2% of the vote that would probably otherwise go to Bernie. I think Yang should drop out, and I'm probably going to get a ton of hate for saying that. But, and this isn't a dig at Andrew Yang by any stretch of the imagination. It's just that the numbers aren't there for him. They're not. And I think a lot of the Yang folks would also go to Bernie. So suddenly you're looking at, 4 to 6% more support for Bernie. That puts him over the edge heading into Iowa.
So you think that Tulsi Gabbard drops out? Now, bringing up Tulsi Gabbard, I want to know your thoughts on her decision to boycott the debate that she didn't qualify for, as well as her decision to not run for re-election for her seat, and also her saying that she's going to stay in the race until the convention. What are your thoughts on those things and her candidacy as a whole right now?
I think her candidacy has really unfolded in a way that I didn't think it would at the start of this. I think her decision to not run for her seat in Congress again is not smart. That was a good seat. She's been pretty good in Congress. And her decision to stay in this thing until the convention, I don't see how she's going to do that with no money. I mean, that's the other thing we got to think of here. Like, okay, you say you're going to stay in, but you're going to run out of money, especially after the first few primaries and caucuses. When you're not the front runner, people stop giving you money. So, okay, you can stay in, but you're not going to be able to travel. You're not going to be able to buy ads. So what exactly are you going to be doing? And in general, as to her decision to, I'm not going to go to the debate. Okay, you're grandstanding at this point. You know, you may not have even qualified for the debate, but you're trying to make a point. I think she's trying to re-sow some of the division from the 2016 primaries. You know, oh, it's the establishment versus this up-and-coming Democratic Socialist. Oh, they're picking on him. They're trying to bury his campaign. I think she wants people to think that that's happening to her rather than your campaign's just not that good.
So do you, how can you even stay in the race after losing, like, some elections? Like, can you even do that after losing, like, let's say she gets, like, a couple percentage points, like, in each state, like, how long can you actually stay? Like, is it actually, like, logistically possible to stay in the race till the convention?
I mean, it is if you don't do anything. You know, if you just randomly keep your name on the ballot, yeah, you can technically do that. But, you know, I don't see all of these Tulsi stands out there being able to give her enough money to actually make her campaign viable by any stretch of the imagination. She's turned off a lot of people, which again is kind of sad because in the early days I liked her. She wasn't my first choice, but she was up there. But now, you know, the more you get to know her, the more you see her policies, you see this kind of, you know, oddness, I guess would be the best word with the foreign policy. You know, are you totally anti-war or are you kind of wanting to go bomb some people? We get different impressions from you. So I don't know, but I do think she will not be staying in this until the convention. And I don't think she's going to have a choice on that given the lack of funding and the lack of support from the voters.
And what do you think about, I don't know if you remember this, but she recently had defended Ellen. People were going after Ellen because, you know, she was hanging out with George W. Bush, palling around. And Tulsi Gabbard sort of, and she's the one who's like the anti-war candidate, so it's especially weird. But she came out and defended Ellen and basically said, you know, we need to stay together and work together on certain values. You know, what are your thoughts on that?
It's just weird, you know, not just Tulsi with that, but with Ellen and just the whole rehabilitation of George W. Bush. I mean, you know, we were doing this during the Bush administration, right? Every single week talking about all of the horrible things this guy was doing and Dick Cheney was doing and everybody in the administration, everybody in Congress. I mean, right there in the thick of it, even before the 2004 election. So having kind of started with that in progressive media like I did, to see these people now act like, well, George W. Bush isn't that bad. I mean, look at how bad Trump is. Do you not remember the pictures from Abu Ghraib? Do you not remember the waterboarding? Do you not remember all of the war crimes that this guy started, not to mention the unwinnable war based on lies? There is no being friends with him. You cannot embrace him. It doesn't matter how many pieces of candy he hands Michelle Obama. It simply is not okay. And it's not okay for Tulsi to go out there and defend that. Well, we need to work together. Listen, the days of working together ended long before Bill Clinton came into office. Republicans made it clear at that point, we're done working with Democrats. And the only time they're willing to work with them is when you get enough corporate Democrats together who say, sure, we'll pass a more than $1 trillion budget. We'll give you $738 billion for your military. That's when Republicans will work with Democrats. They're not willing to do it on anything else.
What do you think the chances, or how long do you see Joe Biden staying the front runner for?
See, that's tricky, because I guess it's going to have to depend on what happens in Iowa. I mean, I know we've all seen polls. Polls are changing constantly. This person's a front runner. This one is. Oh, this person's up here. This one's down here. They're all beating Trump. They're all losing Trump, according to the latest USA Today poll. But once the voters actually get in there, once they see a ballot or they're doing the caucus, once it's real, things change. So if Biden loses Iowa, and then he loses New Hampshire, and then Nevada and South Carolina, which according to the campaign, they're already expecting that. But they think Super Tuesday is when they're going to come in do their clean sweep of it. But I got bad news for them. If you lose those first 4 primaries, your chances historically at this point, based on previous primaries, of winning the nomination drop to virtually 0. So if he loses those first 4, he'll stick in with it till Super Tuesday. But I don't think that's going to change anything. And at that point, he's probably going to have to hang it up.
And so, speaking of 2020 elections, I do want to ask you about all the stuff going on with Cenk Uygur right now. There's a lot of stuff going on. I did see you send out a tweet saying that his campaign is the first one that you've ever donated to. Explain to us why that is, and all of the stuff that's going on with Cenk in the New York Times and his race and his opponent. Just let me know your overall thoughts on the situation.
I think it's very weird, I guess, that the media is doing such hard work to try to take him down. Why are they so scared of him? Well, we know why they're so scared of him. It's the same reason they're afraid of Bernie Sanders, because he wants to come in and shake things up. He wants to come in and actually push policies that are going to help American citizens, but they're not going to help corporations. And all of these outlets out there trashing him, whether it's Jake Tapper from CNN or the New York Times, those are corporate funded entities, and Cenk's coming after their donors. His opponents probably not going to do that. And so when I saw these smears come out, Cenk is somebody we've known Cenk for a very long time. I've had the pleasure of sitting down with him a couple of times, not too many, and nothing too intense in conversation. One time it was just me and him hanging out for 5 minutes, bitching about Dan Bongino and talking about how stupid he is. But still, he's a good guy. He really and truly is. And so when I saw these attacks come out, I just thought to myself, I said, you know what? I have to. I have to. This isn't my district. I live about as far away from California as you can imagine. But I'm going to give some money to him because what's happening to him is ridiculous and it's unfair. And it's time. I don't have much to give, but I'm going to do this when I can. I'm going to start funding it with the little bit I can. And Bernie is next. I have not yet done that. I want to finish a little more holiday shopping to kind of see where I'm at. But in 2016, I will say I did buy a T-shirt and a coffee mug from Bernie Sanders. Not a direct just, here's my cash. I got something in return. But with Cenk, that's the first time I've ever said, you know what? This is my hard-earned money. I know you. I like you. I trust you. I don't believe these smears. I want you to have my money.
Have you seen the Twitter account that's digging up all of these smears?
Yeah.
How do you feel about that? It's weird to me that there's this one person who's just digging through hours of Cenk Uygur content from literally sometimes 2 decades ago.
Yeah, that's the Mendoza Ferrer or whoever it allegedly is. It's psychotic. If this is in fact one person, a real human being, then this is a human being that needs help. And I'm not saying that to just totally insult them, but I did the other day. I went through this Twitter feed, and before the Cenk thing, it was all just Bernie Sanders, bad for days and days and days and days and days. I mean, this person, if it is a legitimate person, is obsessed. I mean, I understand, because I have a lot of friends, good friends in the progressive media who support Elizabeth Warren. And I can disagree with them and say Bernie's a better pick. They can tell me Elizabeth Warren's a better pick. We can argue about it. And we're still super good, great friends. None of them would ever devote all of their time to just trashing Bernie Sanders instead of building up their candidate of choice. Because even they would be like, no, that's crazy. That's a waste of time. People would have me committed if I did that. So that's what I don't get. I don't understand these weirdos like Sally Albright. God, probably the worst of them all. Out there just spending all day, every day saying, I'm devoting my entire life to tearing down the guy who wants to give everybody health care, who wants a Green New Deal. That's horrible to me. No, you're nuts. That's what it is. You're nuts.
Do you think she's a paid operative of either the campaign or the DNC?
I don't know. I'm hoping, and I know actually right now I was, on Twitter before you and I started talking, and people are starting to dig into this. I want to know if we find out something horrid here about the DNC, wouldn't surprise me, given what we've seen, but I'm hoping, it's not a DNC person. Wouldn't surprise me if it's like Center for American Progress type. That would be, one of those like, oh yeah, that makes total sense now. I get it. So we'll see. Obviously, there's a ton of amazing researchers and journalists on the left. Somebody's going to find out who this person or persons are, and then it's, all hell's going to break loose.
Did you catch Christie Smith? I think this is her first like direct response to Cenk. Did you catch that response?
Which one was that? I've seen. I'm pretty sure I did. And then didn't Cenk respond to that one? I don't remember exactly.
So she basically was like, it was one of those Mendoza clips that she was quote tweeting, and it's about him talking about like he says that he would like bulldoze Jerusalem, and he's making fun of like the religious fight over land and stuff like that. And so she responds basically saying, oh, like, you're not a progressive, you're a racist, genocide denier, blah, blah, blah. What are your thoughts on that? And I'm curious because to me it seems like she is not I've never heard her say anything about policy in terms of being against Cenk. She seems to just be doing these smears. So I just wanted to get your thoughts on that and Cenk's response as well.
Cenk's response was wonderful, and I think it's ridiculous that she said he's disqualified. Okay, well that's actually not your decision to make. That's kind of up to the voters. You can't just tell them nope, he's disqualified. You can't vote for him. But I think in general, these people, both the Mendoza Farrer account, Christie Smith, when the only thing you have is talking crap about somebody else, and you're not promoting a candidate, you're not promoting your policy over theirs, when all it is just this other person's bad, no, that means you've got nothing. You've got nothing. And to be honest, I think that's also part of what we saw in 2016 with Hillary. Less than 25% of her ads and her speeches referenced any policy of hers. More than 75% was spent solely on saying, look how bad this Trump guy is. People knew that. People got it. What do you stand for? Now, with this stuff with Cenk, this blew up in their faces. And hopefully, it's going to drive even more support his way. And the longer they sit there and try to, just throw everything at the wall to see what sticks, it's going to hurt them a lot more than it hurts him. And it's going to give him more fodder to say, listen, I'm throwing out policies. You're throwing out video clips taken out of context from 13 years ago. Voters, you tell me which one of us seems more like a serious candidate, and I guarantee you they're not going to pick Smith.
And so what I also want to ask you is what your thoughts are on his odds of winning that election, because his district is kind of weird. It seems purple, or it seems sometimes red, it seems sometimes blue. I think Clinton won the district by like 7 points or something. But I think they had voted in Republicans until Katie Hill was a centrist. So what are your thoughts on his odds to emerge victorious from that election?
Well, I think in general, looking at the country as a whole, we've seen a lot of progressives and a lot of Democrats win areas that nobody thought was even possible. And the reason for that, again, it comes back to policy. You can attract both sides with these progressive policies that are hugely popular. And part of the reason for that is voters understand, the average everyday voters, they're not donating money to campaigns, they don't have lobbyists, they're not getting tax breaks. And that last one there, that's the kicker. They got nothing. They got nothing from the last 3 years of this government. They probably got nothing from the previous 8 years of government either. And they're sick and tired of it. They want a candidate who's going to come out and say, listen, you got screwed during Bush. You probably got screwed during Obama because you got screwed out of the recovery. You didn't get a bailout. You're getting screwed now because you didn't get your tax cut. You're getting hurt by trade wars, depending on where you are and what you buy. I'm offering you something. I'm not offering a policy to benefit those at the top. I'm not offering a policy to make everybody complacent. I'm offering you a better path forward. I'm offering you health care to where you have no payment at point of service anymore. I'm offering you a better job through a Green New Deal. I am offering you student loan debt forgiveness. That attracts Democrats, Republicans, and everything in between. And I think that's going to be the difference. You can win these purple areas. You can win the red areas by simply going out there, explaining what you're about, and offering the people something real.
Okay, so I want to ask you next about you because you touched on Warren and Bernie. I wanted to get your thoughts on this because I saw David Pakman say yesterday that he has not decided. He's undecided between Bernie and Warren, and so he doesn't seem to be making a distinction as to who is better. Do you think that there's a clear choice between the two? And just what are your thoughts on that, generally speaking, that dichotomy of Warren versus Bernie?
I think there is a clear distinction between the two. Bernie has not wavered. He says, this is what I stand for, this is what I want to do, and that's it. And we can go back and check his track record, all the way through the 80s. It's the same. There is no waffling, there is no flip-flopping, and that is why I do trust Bernie more. I believe that everything he's saying he's going to do is exactly what he's going to attempt to do, whereas Warren kind of gets wishy-washy, and that is a huge turnoff, not just for me, but for the voters in general. They want to know exactly where you stand, and they don't want to have to look back in 5 minutes to see if you're still standing there. And that's going to be a huge thing. Now, as for David, David's a good friend. And I don't know who he's supporting. Actually, he and I haven't even talked about it at all. But he is very intelligent. He's also very calculating. And I think he knows what he's doing. So if he is saying, like, I don't know which one I'm going to endorse, I feel like he probably has a very good reason for saying that. Again, he and I haven't spoken about it, so I don't know. But I do feel like if he's saying that, there's probably a good reason why he's saying that. He is not, he's not like me. Sometimes I just throw out and say horrible, crazy things, as we said at the start of this discussion. David would never do that because he doesn't speak from just pure, raw anger like I do sometimes. And, that's probably to his benefit because, yes, it's gotten me in a little bit of trouble that I regret. But for me, it's clear. And I'd be honest, in the early days of this campaign, I wasn't 100% on with Bernie. I knew what he stood for and where he was, but I thought, look, you did try in 2016. It didn't work. Some of it wasn't your fault. But maybe let me see where these other folks stand because I don't want to just, be the fanboy here. And then it became clear. It really did. It's like, you know what? I should have just gone with my gut instinct. I should have just said back in January, I'm endorsing Bernie Sanders. But I waited and I waited because I thought maybe there's going to be a challenge for who's going to be the most progressive, but there's not. It's Bernie. Bernie is the most progressive. Bernie will remain the most progressive. And if we want that best vision of the future, that's the way to go.
Okay, that I agree with you totally. I have one last question for you, and you talked about how, you've known Sam Cedar for a long time. He seemed to, really go off in response to Nancy Pelosi, the Nancy Pelosi clip of her basically saying that, she knew that George Bush lied the country into a war, but didn't want to impeach. And to me, it looked like there was some flashback stress from the time of the Bush era. And so I was wondering if you could give any insight on what those times were like in being, opposing the Iraq War and being anti-Bush as a commentator back then.
Well, I will say it, and I know this applies to Sam too, because we were all with Air America at the time. And that was a living hell. And not necessarily because Air America sucked. Air America was great. The concept was great. The management, not so great in the early days. It slowly got better, but also the financials. When you have a network that's going after the wealthy elite, that's going after corporations, kind of hard to attract donors. And so there was a lot of stress during those days, not just because of the Bush administration and that horribleness, but because of all the behind-the-scenes stuff at Air America too. So we were all just constantly on edge. We didn't know most days if the network was still going to be open next week. Plenty of times where people weren't getting their paychecks because there was no money. So if there was a little bit of PTSD there with Sam, it might not just be because he remembers everything from Bush, but everything that was happening like with our professional careers at the time too, because it was rough. I mean, a lot of the folks that were producers at Air America have gone on. They're doing amazing things. They're wonderful people. But, and this was no fault of theirs or no fault of the on-air talent, except for Al Franken, whose salary kind of bankrupted us in the early days. It was fun. You know, we weren't in New York with them. We went up there frequently, but we were down here in Pensacola. But it was just a struggle, a constant, nonstop struggle with that network, on top of having to go out there every day and talk about how horrible the administration is. So essentially, we went through like 4.5 years of just nonstop bad news everywhere we turned. You're on the air, it's bad news. You know, you finally get off, you go talk to management, it's bad news. So it was a rough time, but I think in the end, the failure of Air America is what helped give birth to, you know, this new progressive media that's emerging on YouTube. You know, some of the folks from Air America still do traditional radio, like Tom Hartman and Stephanie Miller and Randy Rhoads, still out there doing this, and that's wonderful. The rest of us moved more into the YouTube section, and I think it's worked out quite well for all of us. And then, of course, you've got your Rachels who went to MSNBC and completely changed who they are as a person, but that's probably a conversation for a different day.
All right, man. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming on. Is there anything that you would like to say?
No, actually, yes, there is. Just to kind of hit back on what we talked about at the very beginning when we mentioned the thing with Kyle Kulinski. And like I said, everything is cool with us now. And I think as we go forward, all of us in this progressive media, you know, we need to come together a lot. Because I think most of us obviously are on the same page. You and I seem to be on the same page. Kyle's on this same page. I think Sam is on this same page. Michael Brooks, Anna Kasparian, Mike Figueredo, Jeff Waldorf. All of us are really in this together. And so we all have to band together. One thing I would love to start doing in the new year is doing like a weekly or bi-weekly progressive roundtable, just pulling in a bunch of the progressive hosts and just talking about what's happened that week, talking about the election. And so I do think we need a little bit more camaraderie, because there's not exactly a whole lot of competition between us. We each have our own audiences, but at the same time, we can expand each other's audiences by working together a little bit better. So if we do have differences with one another, depending on how big they are, I think at least in 2020, we're going to have to put those aside. We need to all become friends, maybe go on one of those, you know, bonding retreats. I don't know. I can't really do that. But you know what I mean? Like we're in this together. We're all every now and then getting screwed by YouTube algorithms. So let's stick together in 2020 and see if we can make things better for all of us.
Is Jimmy Dore invited to this roundtable?
You know what? I don't know that I can consider him truly a progressive enough. I think he's like 30 seconds away from becoming H.A. Goodman version 2 at this point.
That's very funny. Okay, I think that idea is amazing, by the way. And I did see your tweet, and I saw that I did see a lot of people responding saying that they're down. I think I want to say it was Mike, and I think David even, and some others as well. So I'm totally
David,
down for that.
Ben Dixon as well, and
Yeah.
so.
Yeah,
and I
awesome.
forgot to mention him earlier, but yeah, there's so many more of us out there than even we realize all the time. I think actually probably know who more of them are than even I do. But yeah, we got to have each other's backs. We've got to lift each other up, and that's going to benefit all of us.
Yeah, no, I totally agree, man. Thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it.